Alrighty, guys, let's dive into one of the biggest movies of the summer, I think at least, in terms of box office, but I definitely know in terms of pop culture imprint. Let's talk about Jurassic World Rebirth. This is going to be a non-spoiler and spoiler review, so we'll talk about the non-spoilery side at first, and then we will dive in. I will be very clear about the spoiler section, and if you haven't seen it, you can feel free to skip ahead if you're listening to the entire podcast, or if you're listening to this segment, just make sure to save it for later and come back once you have seen the film if you care about spoilers. And I will be very clear once we start the spoiler section. But first, let's dive into the non-spoiler section of Jurassic World Rebirth. So, Jurassic World Rebirth. This is the third iteration, I want to say, of the Jurassic Park franchise. Obviously, you had the first three, Jurassic Park The Lost World, and then Jurassic Park 3. And then they did a soft reboot with Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard with Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and Jurassic World Dominion was attempting to tie everything together by bringing back the original cast. They're all set in the same universe, right? They're all referencing one another, but, it was clear that Jurassic World was an attempt to, just sort of restart the cycle for the franchise in 2015, I think it was. And this is Jurassic World Rebirth is still using the same Jurassic, World moniker, but it is really the third iteration of this franchise, starring Scarlett Johansson, Mahershala Ali, and Jonathan Bailey as your main actors here. And, for those of you who've seen the trailers, you might have an idea of what the plot is, but like I said, in the name of not giving away anything, just in case you haven't, in case you don't want to know anything, we're not going to really talk about the actual plot of the movie here. And, honestly, what I will say about that is, one of the things that I was thinking about going into Jurassic World Rebirth, I keep wanting to call it Dominion, by the way, I don't know why, Jurassic World Rebirth, is that, these movies have a sort of floor to them in the sense of they're gonna be entertaining enough just based on how they make these movies now with the action and the visuals and whatnot. And if the plot is just flimsy and it doesn't really work, then so be it, was my thought going into the movie. Because, I feel like while I would love the next, Oscar-winning movie to be Jurassic World Rebirth, I don't think we expect that, really, based on the story and based on the characterizations and whatnot. I think we mostly go to these movies to have a good time and to enjoy ourselves. And I think that's fine. That's totally fine. And so that my thought going into the movie was, let's just have a good time. Here's what I'll say, though. The first 30 minutes or so of this movie, I was a little worried because even that low-ish bar, I was like, this movie may not clear that bar. The first 30 minutes of this movie are very shaky, in my opinion. And they do a couple things in the first 30 minutes. First of all, I think the writing sharpens up a little bit as we go throughout the movie. The writing in general is not, it's not the best script I've ever, seen put to screen or anything like that. It is what it is. I think some of the lines and some of the backstory and exposition that are delivered in such short and quick spurts in random scenes just feels very ham-fisted, especially towards the beginning. And I was like, okay, like I get it. You're not, this isn't. I'm not expecting the next Aaron Sorkin drama, but still, this is a little bit on the nose, don't you think? And I do a couple other things. If you've seen the movie, you'll probably know what I'm referring to. That made me go, uh-oh. Is that really where we're going? Is this something that we're doing here? And luckily, I was a little bit, I tried to remain patient with it because there are, it gets better as the movie goes on. But there are a few things that they set up at the beginning of this movie that I'm like, really? Are we really doing that? So the first 30 minutes or so, maybe 20 to 30 minutes, I was like, this is not looking good because for a Jurassic World, Jurassic Park movie, again, it's a very low bar to clear in my opinion. Just be entertaining, just be fun, and have a decent enough story. And so I was getting worried. I will say, though, there are a couple things that start to happen as we get into the end of the first act and towards the beginning of the second act that made me go, okay, I'm on board. And as the movie progresses, I think the pacing tightens up, and some of the decisions that they make don't always work. Some of the things that they're setting up don't always pay off in the most satisfying ways, and don't always work in the ways that I think they were intending to. However, I will say that by the time the movie ends, you see where everything lined up, you see how everything came together, and you're like, you know what? I see it, and I enjoyed it. I had fun. I really did have fun with Jurassic World Rebirth. Is it a perfect movie? No, of course not. There are things throughout this movie that made me go, what's going on here? Or why is this happening? Or what's the point of this? Or why is this character doing that? Or what is this character even doing in the movie at all? But as the movie goes on and tries to tie things together, you're kind of like, oh, I kind of get it now. Action in this movie is great. It is some of the more tense, scary dinosaur action you've seen in the recent Jurassic Park movies, Jurassic World movies. That is one of the things that we talked about in the original reactions, or the first reactions to Jurassic World Rebirth, where people were like, this is, the action's great. It's almost like horror, kind of thing where the dinosaurs are very scary. And I can definitely attest to that. The dinosaurs are scary again. And I think that's good because, in the last movie, Dominion, they were just kind of running around everywhere, and they're on Earth, or they're all over the planet just kind of running around. And it was like, okay, yeah, sure. But in this movie, they're quite scary. Again, like I said, the setup, how they got there, how they're even confronting dinosaurs in the first place, a bit flimsy, and some of the character things that they're trying to set up here don't pay off in the most interesting ways, to be quite honest with you. But I will say that every time there is something going on with the dinosaurs, you're locked in. I was locked in to what was happening here. Performances-wise, you get charismatic actors like Jonathan Bailey, Scarlett Johansson, and Mahershala Ali, who, again, I think that some of the dialogue that they were given early on and the setup was very shaky. But once the characters kind of settle into the movie, you're like, oh, okay, yep, that's why you cast these actors, because they're great, and they're super fun, and they're charismatic, and so you really, really enjoy them. And I think that they all did a very good job, especially towards the end. I will say that the ending set piece was quite good. There were a lot of things going on, but it never felt too chaotic. It felt like everything was happening kind of logically. Like you were like, oh yeah, like because this thing is happening over here, and then this thing is happening over here, and then twists and turns and whatnot. And I was entertained by the ending as well. And I will say as well, there are a couple scenes in the movie that I was like, wow, that actually got me. Not emotionally or anything like that. I wasn't like breaking down in tears or anything. But there are a couple scenes in the middle, especially, where I was just sitting there and I was going, that felt like Jurassic Park. That was, wow, that was great. So the movie really has its moments to shine. And then every once in a while, they'll kind of cut back to something, or they'll jump to something and you're like, do we really need this? And then they'll do something else that you're like, yeah, but that was pretty cool. And I think that's really a lot of what this movie is, I think that, like I said, it definitely gets better as the movie goes along. And you're kind of thinking, it's this back and forth that you're going through with yourself, at least for me, where I was thinking constantly just kind of going back and forth of, do we really need to be doing this? But also that was kind of cool. And as the movie progresses, you're starting to lean more towards that was pretty cool. And again, by the time they end the movie, I sat back in my chair and was like, that was pretty cool. It's, again, the plot is not the sturdiest thing ever. The way that they set it up, you're like, oh, really? That's it. And then you just kind of go and you're like, I guess that's it. There are some characters that are comical. I don't know if they were intended to be like that. There are some characters that make you wonder why they're there. And then you're like, well, I guess they served a purpose. But again, I think that this movie, it serves the purpose of being a Jurassic World movie that has a little bit more, because I do think that while there is a lower bar for these kinds of movies, we've seen it before. We just saw it with Jurassic World Dominion. That movie to me did not clear the bar. Those action scenes, sure, were entertaining. I thought the rest of the movie was terrible. It was just so flat and uninteresting and convoluted. And Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, while not as bad in my opinion, was still in that same boat of, really? This is what we're doing? And this movie has some of those moments of, really? This is what we're doing? But the movie tries to tell you, hey, just hold on here. We're going to take you for a ride and just enjoy it. And I found myself going along with it and being patient and being like, yeah, that makes sense. That I kind of get why you did that. So overall, I would say I would recommend Jurassic World Rebirth if you enjoy the Jurassic Park franchise. I can't promise you're going to love the movie, especially if you're a big fan of the originals. I love the original Jurassic Park. It's obvious. I hope it's obvious by the review. It's nowhere close to the original. I would say though, it pretty much is the next best thing, I think, in terms of what we've gotten in recent years. Like, I think it's easily better than obviously Dominion and Fallen Kingdom. And I would say it's pretty comfortably better than the first Jurassic World, though I do enjoy the first Jurassic World for what it is. So I'm, honestly, if that's the criteria for this, I'm pretty happy with what we got, and I enjoyed it. I will say, like I said, if you, if there are parts at the beginning where you're like, uh-oh, this doesn't look good, I would recommend just stick with it. And At the very worst, the action with the dinosaurs, they're terrifying, and the different kinds of dinosaurs that you see are very interesting. Stick with it, and I think you'll have a good time with the movie. So guys, those are my non-spoiler thoughts for Jurassic World Rebirth, but now we'll dive a little bit into spoilers before we sign off for this segment. And if you haven't seen the movie, I'm just giving you a couple seconds to skip ahead or save the segment for later, log off if you need to, and let's get into the spoilers for Jurassic World Rebirth. So obviously, if you've seen the movie during and you were listening to the non-spoiler section of the movie or this review, you probably know exactly what I was talking about. It's the family subplot with the boyfriend. And when we first get there, I mean, first of all, like I was saying, the beginning, the exposition of this is Dr. Henry, and this is Zora, and this, and I was like, okay. And then later on the boat, there's 2 minutes of exposition where Zora, Scarlett Johansson, and Duncan, Mahershala Ali are just spitting exposition back at each other, and then they just move on. I was like, oh, okay, that was it. And on top of that, then we have this family subplot, which when they first cut to it, and I realized what was going on, because I kind of thought, is this just a rescue thing that's just, that's going to go away after a little bit? I was concerned, especially with Xavier. When he popped out of the boat, and I was like, are we really going there? Are we really just going to have a character be like this for the entire movie? And when the scene kept going and going and going, they had the introduction scene with them on the boat was 10-15 minutes long, and I was like, oh no. Not because, I'm inherently against anything. I get the concept of having non-main characters or quote-unquote civilian characters be in dangers to kind of raise stakes and stuff. I get that. The other films have tried this though, and it usually doesn't work super well. And so when they started to do this, I was like, oh man, like this isn't what I was hoping for. Spending a really extended amount of time with these characters. I will say though, when they interact with the main cast, when they finally get rescued, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Actually, there's some tension here. There's some things going on, and then they get split up again, and I was like, are we really gonna have an entire subplot again with these characters just running around in the jungle for no reason? And look, let's be honest, right? This movie didn't need that. This movie really didn't need it at all, because it kept cutting back to them in the jungle. I will say though, going back to that idea of, did we really need that? But that was pretty cool. It led to some really good action sequences. That T-Rex scene in the river, that was awesome. Super tense. And that poor little girl, by the way, just traumatized by the entire movie. I felt really bad for her the entire movie. Bella was her name. But I think that just the way that they framed the T-Rex and the dinosaurs, I think all of that was really, really well done. And so by the time they actually come back together again at the facility, I found myself being a lot more on board with this family, because if you take a look back at it, the only reason they're in this movie is to just have other people who are, you can root for. You're rooting for Scarlett Johansson, Mahershala Ali, Jonathan Bailey, but root for in a sense of like, these are normal people, right? Scarlett, you know what I mean? Like these are people who, like you and me, who just got caught up in this adventure. And while I would have maybe preferred if they weren't completely split up from the A storyline, if you will, I enjoyed it for what it was. And the ending was great when they're running around and they're all together. And I think that, it just worked. It really worked. The scene also I was referring to earlier where I felt that Jurassic Parkness of it all was, what they called Titanosauruses or whatever, where that was the one scene where they let the John Williams score blast and they just blared it. And I know it's sort of a shorthand. It's cheating in a way. You could blast that theme against any backdrop that's remotely pretty, and I'd be like, yeah, wow, that's amazing. But I think what that scene represented, if you noticed, nobody really talked in that scene except for Jonathan Bailey just cheering, and it's beautiful. It was really great. It just kind of showed you what the wonder of this universe and what the wonder of this franchise really can be, right? That's when they step out of the vehicle in the first movie and see those dinosaurs and the music starts playing. That's what this is about. That's what this franchise is about. Is that, danger for sure, like running around the park and whatnot, but also wonder. And I think that that's what that scene captured super well. And honestly, aside from that, I thought Mahershala Ali was gonna die. And I was happy to see him come back. I thought that he would have had a pretty fitting send off, a sacrifice, which would, was worthy of his character. But happy to see him come back as well. I don't know if they're going to make a sequel to this movie. I kind of hope so, because look, again, I mean, is it a perfect movie? No. Like I said, I thought the first 30 minutes were not my favorite, and I still think a lot of the subplots that they're doing with the family, especially, you look back on it and you're like, well, did we really need to do that though? But I think that the action was great, the visuals were great, the tension was great. The other thing, I guess, to add on to that is that the whole video game setup of we need to collect these 3 different things from these 3 different dinosaurs, and I was like, oh, okay, is that really the entire setup for this movie? It's very simple, but to their credit, they make it work, and they know that they're not here to make the most complex story of all time, and they're here just to run around and be chased by dinosaurs. And I think that they being the crew and the director and the writers did a good enough job with that. And so I was very happy walking into this movie, and I would like to see another one with these characters. I think it would be pretty fun. I don't know about the family. I don't know in what world they come back for a sequel, but with the main 3, Jonathan Bailey, Scarlett Johansson, and Mahershala Ali would be pretty fun. So guys, what did you think of Jurassic World Rebirth? Have you seen it, and did you enjoy it? Or maybe you didn't, and maybe you thought it was the worst one. Maybe you thought it was the best one out of all of them. Let me know in the comments down below.